Hi, welcome to Starz Recapped. Today, I'm going to explain a French-Spanish science fiction horror movie titled Cold Skin, which was released in the year 2017, directed by Xavier Gens. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. We are never very far from those we hate. For this very reason, we shall never be truly close to those we love. The haunting thoughts of the young Englishman go on and on, as he sets sail for a remote South Atlantic island to work as a meteorologist. While his thoughts consume him, Captain Axel approaches and lights a cigarette, telling him that they are almost there. In September 1914, they finally arrive on the island where no one greets them. The young man had been sent to replace another meteorologist stationed there, but there seems to be no sign of anyone. Captain Axel accompanies him to search for the previous meteorologist to ensure his safety. They come across a lighthouse and knock on the door, but no one answers. The young man forces the door open and finds the only other person on the island, Gruner, the signal technician, who greets them both coldly. When Captain Axel asks about the former weather official, Gruner answers that the man they are looking for died from typhus. Gruner seems unbothered by their presence and casually walks around nude. Irritated, Captain Axel and the young man leave the lighthouse. When Captain Axel bids him goodbye, the young man wanders around the island, contemplating his future. Like the previous weather official, he must observe the intensity and direction of the winds for 12 months before someone replaces him. Returning to the cabin to unpack, he finds the previous meteorologist's diary, revealing his name as Aldor. Inside, he discovers sketches, a photograph of Aldor's wife, and even a drawing of the lighthouse with strange creatures beside it. The next morning, he notices odd rock circles on the sand. Heading toward the coast with his telescope to begin work, he peers through the binoculars and sees Gruner stretching, seemingly preparing for a long day of doing nothing. That night while reading, he hears rustling outside his door and assumes it is Gruner. However, the noises grow louder, accompanied by scratching and growling. Then suddenly, a reptilian hand appears at the bottom of the door. Panicking, he immediately steps on it, causing the unknown creature to become agitated. As more sounds emerge, he hides under the floorboards while the creatures attempt to break into his cabin. They attack the place, but soon realize there is no one inside. When the footsteps stop, he looks through a small hole in the floorboards. The creature peers through as well, prompting him to stab its eye with a knife. Terrified, he locks himself underground for the entire night. The next day, he calls out to Gruner, pleading to be let into the lighthouse, but Gruner refuses. Determined to survive, he returns to his cabin and spends the whole day reinforcing it. Among his belongings, he finds a newly acquired rifle, making him feel ready to fight against the unknown monsters. Night falls, and a swarm of beasts emerges from the darkness. Slowly approaching the cabin, he braces himself and begins shooting them one by one. As their numbers overwhelm him, he has no choice but to start a fire. The flames drive the creatures away, but his cabin catches fire in the process. He flees from his burning home, but fortunately, rain begins to fall before the fire consumes everything. The following day, he notices Gruner leaving the lighthouse and discreetly follows him down to the rocks. Just as he prepares to ambush Gruner, a blue female sea creature attacks him. He raises his gun, ready to shoot, but Gruner stops him, showing that the creature is harmless. Sensing an opportunity, the young man offers Gruner some of his supplies in exchange for shelter. Gruner then introduces him as a friend to the sea creature, acknowledging him as one of their own. Later, they head to the cabin to gather the young man's supplies. While searching, he realizes that the previous meteorologist did not die from typhus, but was actually killed by the sea creatures. However, Gruner warns that they need to return to the lighthouse before sunset, as the creatures might attack. They carry the supplies back to the beacon, and after the long journey, Friend collapses from exhaustion. The next morning, he awakens to the female sea creature licking his hand. Attempting to heal his burns, he soon learns that he has been unconscious for 2 days. Friend finds Gruner and takes an inventory of their ammunition. He then observes the sea creature, whom he calls a toad, and notes that, like a loyal dog, she will never abandon her master, no matter how cruel he is. Friend watches her with fascination, sensing that she is different from the others. However, Gruner warns him not to trust her entirely, believing her silent and calm demeanor hides evil intentions. Gruner then gives Friend a tour of the lighthouse, taking him up to the top. Friend wonders why Gruner chose to stay on the island when he had the opportunity to leave upon his arrival. Gruner simply states that he will never return to the civilized world. Now, he is the master of his own destiny. Still, Friend tells Gruner that he intends to board the next passing ship. Gruner, unconvinced, merely wishes him luck. Later that day, Friend reflects on how only a few days of isolation have already changed him. As he organizes his belongings, he is surprised by the presence of the sea creature. He watches as she naively eats a candle. Amused, he tries to explain its purpose, but before he can, Gruner calls him, ordering him to bring his rifle. That night, Friend watches as Gruner prepares for an attack. The older man gives him instructions before firing a flare gun, signaling the beginning of another long night. As the female creature wails into the sky, a horde of sea monsters charges toward them. Gruner immediately begins shooting, but Friend is overwhelmed by fear. Instead of fighting, he slowly steps backward until he collapses. Left alone, Gruner is forced to battle the terrifying swarm by himself. The following day, Gruner is furious at Friend's failure, ordering him to fetch water. Friend obeys, but when he returns, he hears pounding and wailing from inside Gruner's room. To his shock, he discovers Gruner engaging in intercourse with the sea creature. Horrified, he quickly leaves. Later that day, Gruner and Friend eat lunch in awkward silence. Unable to confront him, Friend feels both guilty and uncomfortable. Suddenly, Gruner breaks the tension by slamming the table and warning Friend that he has only one last chance. That night, Gruner once again provokes the creatures by firing the flare gun. As the monsters appear, Friend is paralyzed with fear. In frustration, Gruner locks him outside on the balcony, forcing him to fend for himself. Despite hearing Friend's desperate pleas, Gruner ignores him and falls asleep. At sunrise, Gruner is shocked to find Friend still alive, covered in blood, staring blankly at him. Months pass, and the two men fall into a routine. The creatures attack several nights in a row, forcing them to remain constantly vigilant. The days are monotonous, the nights grow longer, and only the rhythms of nature keep them from losing their sanity. They manage to coexist, with Friend's daily task being to fetch water while Gruner maintains their weapons. One day, Friend speculates that the creatures keep returning to the lighthouse to reclaim the female sea creature. However, he still wonders why she allows her kind to be slaughtered, and why the creatures don't attack on certain nights. Gruner, on the other hand, doesn't care about their motives. He only plans to exterminate them all. Later, Friend visits his old, decaying cabin to reclaim some of his belongings. Looking into a dusty mirror, he is startled by his own reflection. Realizing how much he has changed, hoping to regain some sense of his former self, he trims his beard. On his way back to the lighthouse, he stumbles upon a massive whale skeleton and picks up a piece of bone. That night there are no attacks, leading him to believe that the anticipation of battle is sometimes worse than the battle itself. Still, they use the calm to prepare for the next inevitable attack. While wandering around, Friend comes across the sea creature and, for the first time, approaches her. As he touches her cold skin, he feels an unexpected fondness for the strange being and gives her a name, Anaris. While Gruner treats her as a servant and sex slave, Friend begins to see her differently. One evening, Gruner invites Friend to play chess. As they play, the young man shares his observations and theories about the sea creature's existence. However, Gruner dismisses his words, telling him to shut up and focus on the game. Urging Friend to make a move, he forces a checkmate. Just as the game concludes, Gruner suddenly picks up his gun and aims it at the young man's back. Friend freezes, until he realizes that Gruner is actually aiming at something behind him. The sea monsters have already begun their attack. They rush to higher ground within the lighthouse as more and more creatures arrive. Armed with rifles, they fight, but the ambush is too sudden, and they are quickly overwhelmed. Desperate, they retreat to the lantern pane, where the lighthouse's bright beam cuts through the darkness. During the escape, Gruner is badly bitten on the foot. Limping, he locks himself inside the lantern room with Friend, while the creatures claw at the glass partition. Believing this to be his end, Gruner begins to sing a tragic love song. They spend the night there, trapped, until the sun finally rises, forcing the monsters to retreat. That morning, Anaris tends to Gruner's wounded foot, pressing her tongue into the wound in an attempt to heal it. They know they cannot survive another attack. Their supplies, ammunition, and willpower are all running dangerously low. Later that day, while roaming the island, Friend spots a ship on the horizon. Heart pounding, he immediately runs inside to grab the flare gun. However, just as he is about to fire it, Gruner restrains him, pinning him to the ground. Afraid of being left behind with no one to fight, Gruner refuses to let him signal the ship. Anaris, sensing Friend's distress, tries to protect him, but this only enrages Gruner further. Frustrated, Friend finally snaps, yelling that Gruner is simply afraid of being abandoned and left to fight alone. A little while later, Friend tries to communicate with Anaris in a different way. He carves a small boat out of bone, hoping she will understand his message. To his surprise, Anaris leads him to an abandoned rowboat hidden on the shore, far from the lighthouse. Excited by the possibility of escape, Friend tells Gruner about the boat. However, Gruner remains unfazed, saying he already knows about it. He explains that a Portuguese man once used it to flee a shipwreck, but the sea creatures killed him before he could get away. Gruner also claims that the wrecked ship carried a cargo of dynamite, though he assumes it is all waterlogged and useless. Despite this, Friend becomes intrigued by the idea of exploring the shipwreck. He suggests diving into the sunken vessel, using an old atmospheric diving suit. Gruner, however, dismisses the idea entirely, calling it a suicide mission. One afternoon, determined to escape, Friend begins repainting the rowboat, hoping to make it seaworthy. As he works, he hears a distant howl. Looking up, he spots Anaris swimming nearby, enjoying the water. Drawn to her, he removes his clothes and slowly approaches, as if preparing to kiss her. Unbeknownst to Friend and Anaris, Gruner is watching from the lighthouse. While Friend is reading a book, Gruner hands him a diving suit, having changed his mind after witnessing what happened at the pool. Secretly, he hopes that Friend will die during the attempt, driven by jealousy. The following day, they row out to the shipwreck using the boat. The young man explains that their only means of communication while he is underwater is through rope tugs. 3 tugs will signal that he needs an air supply. Wearing an old diving suit, Friend dives in, searching for the crates carrying dynamite, while Gruner controls the rope from the boat. Underwater, Friend finds the containers and begins hooking them up. However, after securing several small boxes, he notices an infant sea creature peering through his suit, causing him to panic and fall. Frightened, he tugs the rope desperately as more creatures begin to surround him. Gruner watches the rope, hesitating, on the verge of abandoning Friend. However, at the last moment, Friend manages to free himself from the suit and swim back to the surface. Gruner immediately helps him into the boat. Upon returning to the lighthouse, they examine the crates, only to discover that out of all the boxes, only one contains dry, usable explosives. With winter approaching, Friend and Gruner devise a plan. They will lure as many creatures as possible into the lighthouse before detonating the dynamite, hoping to scare them away for good. However, that night no attack comes. Weeks pass in the blink of an eye, and Gruner grows impatient waiting for the big attack. One evening, Friend finds him outside, freezing, still waiting in desperation. He urges Gruner to come inside and defuse the detonator for a while. One day, while waiting for Anaris to bring them food, Friend and Gruner grow restless. When Gruner realizes that she has brought back starfish instead of fish, he kicks her in anger. He also blames her for revealing their plan to her kind. Furious, he grabs Friend's shirt and declares a new plan. They will leave the lighthouse door open, luring the creatures inside for an ambush. That night, Friend leaves the door open while keeping watch. Meanwhile, Gruner takes position at the upper level, ready to detonate the explosives. Hours pass, and it seems as though the creatures won't attack. Growing impatient, Gruner drags Anaris beside him, forcing her to wail, assuming the sound will draw the creatures in. Meanwhile, a sea creature attacks Friend at the main door. He barely manages to escape, but more creatures are closing in. He sprints upstairs, shouting to Gruner that they are now inside. The creatures storm the lighthouse, but when the time comes to detonate the explosives, the detonator fails. Friend rushes to the top of the lighthouse, frantically working to reconnect the detonator. An explosion erupts, killing many sea creatures. Feeling unsatisfied, Gruner decides to set off a second explosion, this time closer to the lighthouse. The blast knocks both him and Friend unconscious. When Friend wakes up the next morning, he immediately searches for Gruner, and is relieved when the old man stirs, mumbling and singing a song. This time, Friend joins in. However, chaos still rages outside. Gruner, now fully awake, takes a spear and begins finishing off the wounded creatures on the beach. As Friend scans the aftermath, he notices something unsettling. One of the dead creatures is wearing a necklace. The sight makes him realize that these beings are far more civilized than Gruner has led him to believe. Gruner, unmoved, snatches the pendant and hurls it into the sea, his rage unwavering. That evening, as they remain on high alert for another attack, Friend hears Anaris and several other creatures wailing in mourning for their fallen kin. Gruner approaches Friend and explains that he once rescued Anaris as a baby when she was caught in a net. Believing that she owes him her life, Anaris vanishes into the night, but Gruner assures Friend that she will crawl back. She always does. Friend, however, begins to regret their actions, though Gruner remains cold, showing no remorse for the slaughter. One morning, Friend traces circles in the sand, placing the carved bone boat at the center, his silent plea for rescue. Meanwhile, Gruner continues preparing for another explosion, still determined to drive the creatures away. Yet another night passes with no attack. One evening, as Friend tidies up Gruner's mess while the old man sleeps, He stumbles upon a wedding photo. On the back, the words love, love, love are scrawled. He recognizes the woman in the photograph. It's the same woman from the diary. The realization hits him. Gruner is the former weather official. He is not as devoid of humanity as he pretends to be. In response to this revelation, Friend erases his tally marks, understanding that everything here is ultimately forgotten, including the very reason for his arrival. There is no work to be done other than survival. Friend then walks to the shore to remove the carved boat when he suddenly sees a young sea creature approaching. Behind the child stands Anaris, now more confident, accompanied by her kind. Friend realizes they have come seeking peace, but Gruner refuses to accept this. He only wants Anaris back. She, however, refuses to return. Gruner repeatedly mutters, "No one leaves Gruner," as he walks back toward the lighthouse. Then suddenly, he fires a flare gun, hitting the sea creature child in the chest, killing him. Anaris turns to Friend, her gaze filled with doubt and disappointment. She leaves him behind. As Gruner continues shooting, Friend lunges at him. They struggle violently, and Friend manages to throw him to the ground, stabbing his leg. Enraged, Gruner regains his footing and prepares to kill Friend with an axe. But then Friend calls him by his real name. "You're not a murderer," he says. Gruner hesitates. The rage fades from his eyes. He drops the axe, muttering love, love, love. As if awakening from a long nightmare, he steps outside. The sea creatures are waiting. They tear him apart under the starry sky. A few months later, the next ship arrives to bring in Friend's replacement. The captain, seeing the man's state, mistakenly calls him Gruner. Friend does not correct him. Gruner is gone, but his legacy remains. The young man assumes his role. Believing this is the missing piece he has been searching for. The new Gruner stands by the balcony, gazing at the sea. Anaris watches him for a moment before running into the waves, disappearing into the ocean's depths. From one hell to another, Friend has found his salvation. A world war might one day signal the end of humanity as we know it, but it won't matter. He left behind one mysterious past, only to discover the same fate awaiting him on this island. He came seeking peace in nothingness, only to find himself trapped in an inferno of monsters. But in the end, he finds peace in one truth. There is no life without love, no hope without love, no humanity without love. That's my explanation for the movie, Cold Skin. So guys, what do you think about the movie? Write in the comment. Subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on the notification and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.